Your boss just gave you a 4% raise. You feel good about it. You worked hard. You earned it. You're making more money than you did last year. Except you're not. You're actually poorer than you were 12 months ago. The number on your paycheck went up, but your purchasing power went down. You can afford less groceries, less gas, less of everything that matters. And here's the part that'll keep you up at night. Most people getting raises right now are experiencing the exact same quiet erosion of wealth, and they have no idea it's happening. This isn't about doom and gloom. This is about math. Cold, unforgiving. Math that doesn't care how hard you worked or how proud you felt when you got that raise. Because somewhere between your salary increase and your actual spending power, there's a gap. And that gap has a very specific number attached to it. Today, we're going to find that number. Let's start with what everyone already knows. Inflation makes things more expensive. Prices go up. Your money buys less. When you were a kid, a candy bar cost 50 cents. Now it's $2. Simple enough. But here's what doesn't get talked about enough. Your salary plays this exact same game, just in reverse. And most people are losing without realizing they're even playing. In 2023, the average American worker got a raise of around 4.5%. Sounds reasonable. Sounds like progress. But that same year, inflation was running at 4.1%. Do the math and you're left with a real gain of 0.4%. Less than half of 1%. That's not a raise. That's barely a rounding error. And in 2022? Forget about it. Average raises hit 5.8%. Inflation came in at 8%. That's a net loss of 2.2%, which means if you made $60,000 and got what felt like a generous $3,500 raise, you actually lost $1,300 in purchasing power. You worked harder. You earned more. You got poorer. The question everyone should be asking right now is this. At what exact point does my raise stop being a raise and start being a pay cut in disguise? To understand this, you need to understand how inflation actually interacts with your paycheck. And it's not as straightforward as people think. Most people imagine inflation as this uniform force that makes everything cost the same. Percentage more. Like someone turned a dial and every price in the economy went up by 3%. But that's not how it works. Inflation is uneven. It's chaotic. And it hits different parts of your budget at wildly different rates. Let's say inflation is running at 5% on average. That's the number you see on the news. That's the consumer price index. But housing costs might be up 7%. Groceries up 8%. Gas up 12%. Meanwhile, the cost of electronics dropped 2% because of supply chain improvements. Here's the problem. You don't live in the average. You live in the specifics. If most of your budget goes to rent, food, and transportation, and those categories are inflating faster than the national average, then the real inflation rate you're experiencing is higher than what gets reported. Maybe much higher. This is where the gap starts to open. Your employer gives you a raise based on the official inflation number. 4%, 5%, whatever the Fed is reporting. But your lived inflation, the one that actually affects your bank account, might be 7 or 8%. So even if you get a raise that technically beats inflation on paper, you're still falling behind in practice. Now layer in taxes, because raises push you into higher marginal tax brackets. Let's say you make $70,000 and you get a 5% raise. That's $3,500 more dollars. Sounds good. But that additional income gets taxed at your marginal rate, which might be 22% federally, plus state and local. Suddenly that $3,500 raise becomes $2,700 after tax, maybe less. And we haven't even talked about lifestyle inflation yet. The natural human tendency to spend a little more when you earn a little more. New subscription here. Nicer restaurant there. Nothing crazy. But it adds up. And it's psychological quicksand. So here's what's really happening. Your nominal raise goes up 5%. Taxes take a cut. Your lived inflation is running higher than the official number. And your spending creeps up because you feel like you can afford it. By the time all these forces finish compressing your paycheck, that 5% raise might deliver zero real improvement to your life. Or worse, it might make you poorer. Let's run the actual numbers, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Scenario 1. You make $60,000 a year. Inflation is at 6%. You get a 4% raise. Your new salary is $62,400. But the cost of maintaining your exact same lifestyle just went up by $3,600. Your raise gave you $2,400. You're short $1,200. That's $1,200 of purchasing power you just lost. You're objectively worse off than last year, despite earning more money. Scenario 2. Same $60,000 salary. Inflation drops to 3%. You get a 5% raise. Now you're at $63,000. Cost of living went up $1,800. Your raise gave you $3,000. You're up $1,200 in real terms. That's an actual raise. That's progress. That number means something. The break-even point is obvious now, right? Your raise needs to equal or exceed inflation. But here's the twist. It needs to exceed your personal inflation rate, not the national average. And it needs to exceed it by enough to cover the tax drag on that additional income. Let's get specific. If inflation is running at 5% nationally, but your personal basket of goods is inflating at 6% because you live in an expensive city and you drive a lot, you need more than a 6% raise to break even. You need something closer to 7 or 7.5% to account for taxes eating into that nominal increase. Anything less than that, you're moving backward. And here's the really dark part. Most companies budget raises at 1 to 3% below current inflation. It's deliberate. It's policy. Because paying everyone enough to keep up with inflation is expensive, and cutting real wages while increasing nominal wages is a magic trick that keeps employees happy without actually costing the company more in real terms. From 2020 to 2023, the average cumulative inflation was around 18%. The average cumulative raise over that same period was around 14%. That's a 4% gap, which means even workers who got raises every single year are now 4% poorer in real terms than they were 3 years ago. 4% doesn't sound like much, but on a $60,000 salary, that's $2,400 of annual purchasing power that just evaporated, gone. And most people never noticed because the number on their paycheck kept going up. Now let's talk about what companies tell you versus what they're actually doing. When your manager sits you down and says, "We're pleased to offer you a 4.5% increase this year," it's framed as a reward, recognition for your hard work, a sign that you're valued. And maybe you are valued, but that 4.5% isn't designed to make you richer. It's designed to make you slightly less poor than you would be without it. This is wage erosion dressed up as compensation growth. The narrative that gets sold to workers is that any raise is a good raise, that you should be grateful, that in a tough economy, companies are doing their best. And sure, some companies genuinely are constrained, but many others are running record profit margins, while giving employees raises that don't keep pace with inflation. The gap between productivity growth and wage growth has been widening for decades. Workers produce more value per hour than ever before, but real wages, adjusted for inflation, have been mostly flat since the 1970s. Every time there's a spike in inflation, workers lose ground, and when inflation cools, wages don't catch back up. The ratchet only turns one way. Here's the irony. During high inflation, companies can quietly cut real wages while loudly celebrating nominal raises. It's perfect cover. You get a 5% bump and feel good about it, even though you needed 7% just to stay even. The company saves money. You lose purchasing power, and everyone smiles and shakes hands. Meanwhile, executive compensation, which is often tied to stock performance and revenue targets, tends to rise much faster because it's structured differently, because the people setting the compensation are also the ones receiving it. The math works out very differently when you're at the top. Zoom out for a second and think about what this means on a societal level. If the majority of workers are getting raises that don't keep up with inflation, then the majority of workers are getting poorer every year, slowly, quietly, in a way that doesn't show up in unemployment numbers or GDP growth or any of the metrics that politicians point to when they say the economy is strong. And this creates a weird psychological dissonance. People feel like they're doing everything right. They're working hard. They're getting raises. They're advancing in their careers, but they can't shake the feeling that they're falling behind, that things were easier a few years ago, that their money doesn't stretch as far. They're not imagining it. It's real. The math confirms it. This is how you get an economy that looks good on paper, but feels bad in practice. Median household income goes up, but median purchasing power stays flat or declines. Stock markets hit record highs, but the average person can't afford to buy a house, or save for retirement, or handle an unexpected expense. And the longer this goes on, the more people start making decisions based on this erosion. They take on debt to maintain their lifestyle. They delay having kids. They skip medical care because the copays are too high. They work second jobs. They stop contributing to retirement accounts. These aren't individual failures. These are rational responses to a system where raises don't function the way people think they do. And the fix isn't simple. You can't just demand higher raises, because companies operate within constraints too. Margins, competition, cost structures. If everyone got raises that genuinely beat inflation, prices would rise to compensate, and we'd end up right back where we started. It's a loop, a trap, and no one actor can break out of it alone. So here's where we land. The salary increase you need to actually get richer, not just maintain your current standard of living, is probably higher than whatever you've been getting. And it's definitely higher than whatever HR tells you is competitive. If inflation is running at 5%, you need at least 6 to 7% after taxes to come out ahead. If your personal inflation is higher because of where you live or how you spend, you need even more. Anything less and you're playing defense. You're losing slowly. The raise is a pay cut with better branding. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people will never get raises that consistently beat their real inflation rate, not because they don't deserve it, not because they're not working hard enough, but because the system isn't designed to deliver that outcome for the average worker, which leaves you with a choice. You can stay where you are and accept the slow erosion. You can switch jobs more frequently, because new hires often get better bumps than loyal employees. You can build skills that command higher pay. You can negotiate harder, knowing the real numbers. Or you can find ways to reduce your personal inflation rate by cutting costs, moving somewhere cheaper, changing how you spend. But you can't pretend the 4% raise is making you wealthier, because the math doesn't lie. And the gap between what you think you're earning and what you're actually gaining is wider than you think. The question isn't whether inflation is eating your raise, it's how much, and whether you're okay with that.